Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 39 of Podcast vs. Enemies, a Destiny Massive Breakdowns show. We are back to business as usual after an incredible interview with Bungie developers Chris Proctor and Vivian Bex in our last episode. For those of you who have just started listening, welcome. My name is Impetus, and I am one of 3 hosts. This week, I am joined by Court, while our third host, St. Kabir, is off enjoying his honeymoon. As for what this show is about, we cover the PvE endgame in Destiny, which is everything from weapon reviews to sandbox interactions to activity breakdowns. We want this show to provide you with the knowledge and tools you'll need to start tackling dungeons, raids, and high-level nightfalls. Every season, we cover the new weapons, the dungeon or the raid, and the 6 Grandmaster Nightfalls as they release later in the season. I am going to touch on some podcast reviews and community feedback before I pass you over to Court. We have 2 reviews I'd like to shout out. Spanky and Patient Wolf, thank you so much for your kind words. Spanky, congratulations on mastering those Grandmasters. I know how good that feels, and good luck with the future gilding of your Conqueror title. Patient Wolf, thank you so much for your kind words. That means a lot to us, and we greatly appreciate your support. As a reminder, you can send us all kinds of feedback directly to any of our socials, which we'll provide at the end of the show, or via the Destiny Massive Breakdowns Discord server. Positive, critical, and constructive feedback helps with the trajectory of the podcast and how we present and break down builds, activities, and much more for our established Destiny players as well as our new lights. So do not hesitate to reach out if you've got any questions or ideas. We are all happy to talk Destiny. And just as a note about podcast reviews, we use Chartable to aggregate those, and that means that it could take some time for our non-US based listeners' reviews to appear. So if you would like to get a shout out a little bit closer to when you submit a review, you can copy and paste that and send it to a DM of ours, and we will give you a shout out as quickly as we can. And finally, we want to extend a special thank you and appreciation to everyone that supports the show, whether that is downloading and listening, or discussing it in the Discord server, or supporting us via Patreon. We see you. Thank you so much for your support. Court, we have had a very busy week. We've got a lot coming up. What are we talking about today?
Hello, Impetus. Yes, we have. We've had a very busy couple of weeks. I am a little bit tired from all the action that we've had the last couple of weeks. Obviously, last episode we had the big interview and Q&A with Chris and Vivian. But for this week, we are going to be talking about some top highlights that we are getting in Season 19. We are also going to be talking about the Devil's Lair Grandmaster overview, and we have some recommended weapons and builds for each of the classes. And we are, of course, going to break down and provide some sort of helpful tips for the pain points for the Devil's Lair Grandmaster. Like I said, this is where we normally talk about, housekeeping and updates for the podcast. If you've been living under a rock, if you're wondering why we're talking about a Podcast versus Enemies featuring 2 Bungie developers, Vivian Bex and Chris Proctor, well, you're going to need to listen to last week's episode. Or if you want to listen again, please do. Of course, we were joined by those 2, and we had a lot of fun discussing and asking questions. We do want to extend our many thanks to Vivian and Chris for their time, and Bungie for this great opportunity. We'll gladly have you and any other developers back on anytime. We do, of course, want to just do another special shout out to the Massive Breakdown patrons for all their great and varied questions. Of course, MisterSudden for the mammoth task of editing and keeping the audio in check. And finally, Kit Kutcha for the tips and the sort of delegation of all the behind-the-scenes stuff, of which there were plenty. You can, of course, if you don't necessarily have a lot of time right now, if you want a nice abridged breakdown, or you want the full transcript, you can head over to Reddit to read up on my sort of abridged breakdown of Impetus's full show notes, which are located on the Massive Breakdowns website. And of course, Impetus, thank you for that transcription and the timestamps. So Lots of things were discussed, which we'd love to come back and add our own reaction and commentary in a future episode, maybe next week, once Saint returns. And finally, just, sound off your reactions. Let us know how we did, both praise and critique. This was, of course, our very first Q&A / interview. So we'd love to hear your feedback and anything that we could do that could be improved for the future. We'll say that we've heard and seen a lot of praise so far, especially for Vivian. I think three of us as well, we are really excited and happy to have provided a platform for her first podcast appearance to explain the team's goals for and the philosophy of Elemental Sandbox perks. So let us know on any of our socials or Discord if you've got any feedback. We'd love to hear them. Last week in Destiny, for us, obviously we were doing that Q&A, but in terms of the game, not a lot. I think I only did 2 Grandmasters, and been playing a lot of Modern Warfare 2, as I've mentioned before, and just reading up on all the reactions and commentary from our last episode as well. Impetus, what have you been up to?
I have been doing some GMs. I did, of course, stop to kind of catch my breath and, get those dopamine levels all filled up from reading all the positive reactions to the episode and the interview. But I've been doing, I did do all 6 GMs. So I have my Conqueror title gilded. I've been helping some other people gild their Conqueror titles. And I've been getting a lot of Adept Mindbender's ambitions. So got a few interesting rolls. We'll see how they play out. Maybe I'll hold on to them. Maybe I won't. But, been a pretty good week. And of course, Sankabir, off enjoying his honeymoon. He got married. So really just having a standout month, that guy. Getting a Bungie dev interview in and a life partner, so really hard to top that. Hopefully, he can do some GMs when he comes back. Just keep those highlights going. But we're gonna transition over to talking about the 11.3 TWAB. This did highlight the abilities sandbox changes coming in Season 19. There were touches for all 4 of our elements here, just some tweaks, some balance patches here. We were also kind of told right at the start, at the top of the TWAB, that any large-scale ability energy economy tuning would be on a post-Lightfall timeframe, so that we can include Strand in the holistic review. So this balance patch for Season 19 is really just the primary goal there is to closely normalize the power of the existing subclasses so that they can have a better baseline for future tuning. So let's get into that tuning. Starting with Solar, Restoration has been touched. Very, very spicy elemental verb here. So the Restoration ×1 base healing rate has been reduced from 25 to 20 health per second. That is in PvP. In PvE, it is 40 health per second, down from 50. And then Restoration ×2 has also received a reduction from 40 to 32.5 in PvP, and 65 down from 80 in PvE. This will no longer stack with the Healing Rifts healing, so the stronger value of healing over time will be prioritized by the game and will stop the weaker effect from proccing. So that is how Restoration is getting tweaked. A few embers, which are the solar fragments, have also been touched as well. Ember of Torches, the radiant base duration has been reduced from 10 seconds to 8 seconds, and it is now also carrying a -10 discipline penalty when you equip it. Ember of Solace now provides a bonus 50% to radiant duration rather than a flat 5 seconds. This is consistent with its behavior with Restoration. The Hunter aspect Knock 'em Down has been tweaked in regards to supers. So with Golden Gun, there is now a 15% bonus damage resistance to Deadshot Golden Gun and no longer provides bonus duration. It also no longer provides 15% bonus damage resistance to Marksman Golden Gun. And as for Blade Barrage, the bonus projectiles provided by this aspect have been reduced from 5 to 3 per group. So it now releases a total of 20 knives, down from 24. Moving on to Void. Void Overshield. This one is going to be very interesting next season. fixed an issue where the overshield was only providing 25% PvE only damage resistance to the overshield rather than the intended 50% PvE only damage resistance. So Void overshields are getting a pretty big buff. Titans are rejoicing for sure. Moving on to Super Talk. This is very interesting stuff. So we'll start with Warlocks here. The Vortex Nova Bomb has received some buffs. The initial projectile speed has been increased by 21%. The radius of the inward pull upon impact has been increased by 17%, and the strength of the inward pull upon impact has been increased by 20%. Really just small buffs to make sure that this is a little bit more of a viable option here. So it could be very useful for burst crowd control, especially depending on how you angle that the bomb itself, where you place it. Could be very interesting having a bigger suck now, but we will see how things play out. Hunters, a little bit more differentiation between the two types of Shadow Shot. So starting with Deadfall, the increased the tether anchor lifetime when triggered from 8 seconds to 12 seconds. And then Moby's Quiver has had its tether anchor lifetime reduced when triggered from 8 seconds to 6 seconds. Court, what's going on with Arc and Stasis?
Yeah, so Arc is obviously one of the more recent changes. That was the last 3.0 to be uplifted. So there aren't a lot of changes. They've seen a lot of big outliers, specifically to do with the Touch of Thunder Storm Grenade. They're talking about they plan to decrease Touch of Thunder Storm Grenade base roaming duration from 5 to 4 seconds. And the combination with Touch of Thunder with Spark of Magnitude to enhance the Storm Grenade is going from 2 seconds to 1.5 seconds. So that's the bonus lifetime granted. In terms of Ballistic Slam, they felt like they not necessarily hitting the sort of quota, so to speak. So they're increasing Ballistic Slam by 16% for PvE combatants. Tempest Strike, one that I've particularly been kind of a bit iffy about for hunters. They are increasing that by 30% for PvE combatants. For our Warlock friends, we have Arc Souls, which are getting their base damage versus PvE combatants increased from 35 to 60. Obviously, this is a little bit different in terms of how this scales to different modifiers and light level activities. So that sounds kind of small. It's like, oh, they only do 35 and 60, but that's the base amount. So that's that's double damage, essentially, almost double damage. Ball Lightning, the increased travel range has been increased up to 35 meters, and that's from 27.5. That's base. Chain Lightning, again, another one that they're not quite happy with where it's settled in the PvE sandbox, is being increased by 50%. And Chaos Reach is going from tier 4, I want to say, to tier 2 to tier 4? It's going from 9, the base cooldown is 9:16, and it's going down to 7:35. And that's if you have, so that's based on Intellect tier 3. That's where the base cooldown is. In terms of, I can never quite work out how that's structured in the tier list. Tier 5's the fastest.
Yes. So I think it does go up to, is it 4 or 3? Goodness, if it's 4, that's spicy.
Yeah. So nice little change there for Chaos Reach. For Stasis, which I know a lot of people were maybe getting a bit, dabbing their eyebrows because a little bit of sweat was starting to come through, thinking, "Oh no, Stasis and PvP." But obviously, we don't really concern ourselves with the PvP sandbox here in Podcast versus Enemies. To be honest, Stasis is in a reasonably good shape for most of the classes in PvE, but they are changing a few things. Stasis Slow, they wanted to put more of an emphasis on this stasis effect. So they've increased the movement speed penalty while slowed by 10%. So I think the penalty right now is 30%, and that should go up to 40%. I think that's roughly speaking. I'm not sure if it's additive or multiplicative if they're going each way, but it's around about that. So a larger kind of slow effect. You'll be slowed more dramatically compared to before. Cold snap grenades have been getting a little bit of a, they're not a little bit of janky. To be honest, they can be really frustrating to use. Their seeker will now adjust its trajectory for 0.5 seconds after creation, rather than immediately finding a target and traveling toward their last known position. So they should be a little bit more user-friendly, should track enemies a little bit more responsively than before. We are getting two aspects, one on the Hunter and one on the Titan. Their fragment slots are being increased from 1 to 2, and that's Winter Shroud. That is when you dodge, you send out a burst of slow effect, and Cryoclasm, which is the think of Solar's what's the name? Consecration, that's the one, where you do a slide effect and you spread out a bunch of stasis and crystals in front of you. So that's also going up from 1 to 2. So nice changes there. I think stasis can be quite difficult to get into applying fragment slots, just because a lot of the aspects are quite low. So that's a nice little change. Maybe I might start using Winter Shroud, because it can be a really good one for applying slow to a large area of ads if you're stuck and you just want to send out a bunch of slow, and then send out some Withering Blades as well to freeze them. Shade Binder, the Glacial Harvest aspect is getting a slight buff as well. Reduced cooldown on Stasis Shard creation. So that's per 6 shards, from 15 seconds to 10 seconds. And the Whisper of Rending, I just had to double check if this was actually right. Yeah, it is. Now provides bonus damage to stasis crystals and frozen targets for all primary ammo weapons, rather than just kinetic primary ammo weapons. So before, right now, before this change goes live in Season 19, only kinetic primary ammo weapons could affect frozen targets. There was also this weird thing with Whisper Rending with stasis weapons where it affects, I want to say, let me load up my sheet here. Stasis weapons would affect frozen targets, but not stasis crystals. So there's,
oh no,
it's just this really weird thing going with Whisper of Rending. I've never really understood what its purpose was, to be honest. So now every primary ammo weapon, regardless of its element, will get affected by this. So it's 100% increased damage to all stasis crystal sizes, and then for the frozen effect, it is it's 42.5% increase to frozen enemies. So that'll apply to any primary ammo weapon. So I think there's been a lot of talk of how will this affect things that can apply jolt, scorch stuff, anything that those kind of weapons, Brigand's Law and Mini Tool are the two things that are coming to mind. Thinking of how could I use this for Whisper of Rending. So that'll be interesting. Some interesting stacking potential with Whisper of Rending. And yeah, that was it for the Season 19 ability changes. Just want to highlight that they do plan to do a sort of a much larger scale post Lightfall. I know there's a little bit more chatter that this may have been this season may have been the big bringing everything into line, but it appears not to be. We did get some very minor information about the dungeon, which launches in season 19, and that drops December 9th. That's Friday, the first Friday of the new season, at 9 a.m. Pacific, and that's reset time. So, some interesting changes there. Anything that's you want to highlight there, Impetus? Anything that's kind of striking out for you?
I mean, the Arc Soul changes, man. I've been on Getaway Artist all season. Love to see these being buffed massively. I think some people kind of scoffed at Arc Souls as a viable tool in in-game PvE this season, and I could certainly understand that with the base damage only being 35, but this should be a much more powerful tool, definitely in the lower levels of difficulty content, but yeah, this is going to be strong, really, really strong, especially when you pair it with Getaway Artist. That's going to make those sentient Arc Souls that much stronger. Chaos Reach stuff kind of also caught my eye. We'll see how that one plays out. It needs some work. Maybe this is enough to get it kind of back into the rotation for me, but yeah, not too excited. Stasis Slow is probably the other big one, of course, being a Warlock. I'm slow is kind of what we do best on the Shadebinder class, so glad to see that having a bit more utility with the penalizing movement speed. That should probably make the turrets on my Osmomancy build a little bit more potent, but yeah, very excited. How about you?
I was actually pretty surprised about Restoration. I was not expecting a little tweak, especially in PvE. Is there a case of, Restoration can be a little bit, tiny bit of power creep in terms of difficulty? I don't tend to use a lot of Solar post season 17, but that was one thing that kind of really surprised me, was seeing the Restoration changes. I know this is more applicable to PvP, where there is that kind of stacking kind of pain, and trying to defeat someone that's got Restoration ×2 can be quite painful. But yeah, they commented about Blade Barrage being quite top tier for DPS and has been for quite a while. I do agree. I think Blade Barrage just did a little bit too much damage compared to the other supers, and especially compared to Golden Gun. I've said in the past, though, that especially King's Fall, Golden Gun actually does have an edge over Blade Barrage because of just the way you're doing damage to some of the bosses. But Blade Barrage doesn't really do a lot of effect. Void Overshields. Very interesting to see how that will go down. That's 25 up to 50% DR. May change a few of my builds. Hunters don't have a lot of avenues to get Void Overshield other than Gerfalcons or Repulsor Brace. But that's a very interesting one. May hear about some slightly different builds for next season, depending on the GMs we get. If we get any Void, Singe, Void Burns GMs next season, then yeah. Other than that, yeah, I think I was really quite impressed by some of these. I know a lot of folks in the PvP side were pretty worried with some of these changes, especially Stasis. But yeah, overall quite happy, and yeah.
All right, let's get into our GM. This is going to be the final GM that we cover for this season. We did skip Exodus Crash. That was obviously the one that would have come up had we not done the Bungie interview. It's a bit of a weird one in terms of scheduling because Exodus Crash will not be returning at all. So it was only around for that 1 week, which means if you did not have access to the Grandmaster catch-up node that is available for people that have already gotten the Conqueror title, you don't have any way to play it right now. So for us, of course, trying to do a breakdown of it, that's only going to appeal to people that have already done Conqueror, and at that point, we figure you're probably pretty experienced enough that you probably don't need a first-time walkthrough of that, but you, of course, are welcome to ask us questions. So for right now, we're probably going to do an Exodus Crash GM breakdown the next time it appears in a seasonal rotation. We're not going to circle back around after this week. And again, that's just due to factors that were partly out of our control. So sorry, not sorry. It's not a fun GM to run or cover. We're instead going to be focusing on the Devil's Lair today. So the weapon, the adept weapon dropping this week should be Silicon Neuroma. This is also going away. Am I right on that? This is going away after
yes,
after this season? Yep. Yeah, that and Duty Bound. So this is your last opportunity to grab it from GMs. The champion types that we have here in Devil's Lair are going to be Barrier and Overload. So the available mods for those two champions: for Anti-Barrier, we have Auto Rifle, Scout Rifle, and Sniper Rifle for the weapons. And then for Overload, we have Bow, Machine Gun, and Arc Grenades. You will see all three shields in here. That is Arc, Solar, and Void. Most of them are going to be Arc. You will have Void at the very end, and there are just a few Solar sprinkled throughout with the hive enemies. The burn is going to be Arc. That means that you will receive an increase to your arc damage, incoming arc damage by 50%, but your outgoing arc damage will be increased by 25%. We'll talk a little bit more about how you can optimize for that in a moment. Noteworthy enemies, actually, a lot of vehicles in this one. So we have one fallen Spider Walker, that's the tank. We have two Brigs that will show up, and then throughout the GM we have Skiffs. Now the Skiff turrets can be shot off. They deal arc damage, and they will hurt a lot. They can catch you off guard if you're not ready for them, so just be aware of those three different types of machines and vehicles. But there's very specific rooms in which they show up. They're not as frequent, but when they do show up, you do need to be aware of them. So we'll talk about how to deal with those in a moment. I'm going to touch on a bunch of different weapons that we would recommend for bringing in here, both exotic and legendary. We have done in-depth reviews of their perk pools in prior episodes, so I'm not going to go all the way through all the different perk combinations to look for. If you have trouble finding the episode in which we covered a particular weapon, you are welcome to reach out to any of us. We will point you to the episode listing for any of these. So starting with primaries, I'll touch on the exotic options here. For barrier weapons here, Quicksilver Storm and a Wishender are going to be great for dealing barrier damage, dealing with champions. Quicksilver also does have that weird quirk that we found out was a quirk of dealing arc damage with the rocket launchers. That's not intended. That will get fixed at some point in the future, but regardless, right now it's still working, and it's going to be great to take advantage of the burn while also having infinite ammo. And then in the elemental slot here with the bows to take advantage of Overload Bow, you can of course use Trinity Ghoul to take advantage of the burn, but then also Tikus or Lemonarch for the solar and void shields, as well as the Overload champions. Moving on to legendary weapons, I'll touch on our auto rifles. We've got Sweet Sorrow and Come to Pass as fantastic craftable arc options, Amit AR2 and the Summoner for solar, and of course Gnawing Hunger as your dominant void auto rifle. For scout rifles, again going back to Arc, Tarnished Metal from this season, Contingency Plan, great PvE perks there, Staccato 46 and Vision of Confluence for solar, and Doom of Calcus and Aisha's Embrace for void. Going over to bows, great options here as well on the legendary side. Arsenic Bite is probably the best arc bow. That is a world drop. It can be very difficult to get a good roll, but it has phenomenal perk combinations. Strident Whistle for your solar choice, dropping from the Vanguard playlist, and then Under Your Skin as a craftable void bow from Season of the Risen. Moving on to our special weapons in the exotic slot, a favorite of ours, somewhat, sort of, a controversial favorite. Arbalest is going to be fantastic. It'll pop every shield in one bullet. Great for that long distance range, which is something that we need to be thinking about for this GM in particular. Great for dealing solid precision damage. Can't go wrong with Arbalest. You've also got Wither Horde. That's going to be very strong in the deactivation room and then also the boss room, just due to the close-up ranges and the number of ads that are in there. Great for throwing that down in front of a doorway to kind of just lock down an ad wave as they rush you. On the special legendary side, snipers have anti-barrier, so I'll touch on that. For kinetics, Succession is going to be fantastic. For stasis, you've got Thoughtless. For arc, Adored, or if you have a really solid roll of Macabre, or Mashaber, or Mechabre, however you want to pronounce that. And then for solar, we have Uzume. That's no longer acquirable. That was an old adept weapon from GM's prior. Very solid PvE perks there. And then for void, the Crucible drop, Frozen Orbit. Grenade launchers, also going to be very solid here. They don't have a champion mod, but very good for crowd control, preventing enemies from rushing you. On the arc side, Salvager Salvo and Forbearance, that chain reaction perk that shows up in Column 4 is just so strong for completely demolishing a wave of enemies as they approach you. You've got Empty Vessel, also from the Vanguard playlist, and then Explosive Personality, that is the Waveframe Solar Grenade Launcher from Season of the Risen. And then on the Void side, Truth Teller and Deafening Whisper. Also want to mention Empty Vessel and Truth Teller do have blinding grenades on them. They can roll with that. That is also an excellent crowd control strategy. Give yourself some room to back up and retreat, reposition before you re-engage. Very, very strong option. You could, of course, go the damage route with something like Spike Grenades and a damage perk if you so choose. Moving on to heavies, in the exotic slot, really the one that comes to mind that I took in when I did a first clear of this was Thunderlord. Had a great time dealing with the Overload champions with this. The boss does not have a lot of health, so you don't really need to maximize for a ton of damage. Just make sure that you're really taking advantage of the arc burn, and you should be good to go there. So I was using Thunderlord for great crowd control, and then stunning and melting the Overload champions that spawn throughout here. On the legendary side, LFRs are probably going to be a safer bet than rocket launchers. When you're trying to burst down the tank and the Briggs, you want to make sure that you have a weapon that can take advantage of hitting a crit shot. So LFRs, machine guns even can be a better option here. Rocket launchers, not so much, because we don't get that precision damage. So the two arc LFRs that we're going to recommend, Storm Chaser and Sails by Pitch Glass from this season. Fantastic option. On the machine gun side, you could run Chain of Command. That does have Osmosis and Adaptive Munitions as the different options in column 3 and 4. That is the ritual weapon from last season. You can change that to arc if you're running an arc subclass. You can also just shred through non-matched shields with adaptive munitions, so that's a fantastic option for hitting shielded enemies and then also stunning champions. If you wanted a true arc machine gun, we've got 7th Seraph Saw. I know that I think it was Zur that was selling a pretty decent roll of that a few weekends ago. You've also got the Swarm. That was an old adept one dropping from GMs a few seasons ago. Those will be excellent for stunning Overload champions and then quickly clearing out enemies as they try to kill you. I'm going to touch on recommended mods real quickly, and then we'll get into our subclass breakdowns. Some artifact mods to just be aware of. Thermoshock plating is going to be a must in here. Get that extra arc and solar resistance coming in here. That's going to be huge. Put that on your chest piece. If you want to stun Overload champions with your arc grenade, you can use Surge detonators. That's going to be a great option. I definitely recommend using Pulse or Skip grenades for that. They will offer the most consistent stunning experience. Remember that Overload champions in particular love to teleport around, so something like Storm Grenade, even though it is a very powerful tool, can be difficult to lock down that stun, as when you go to throw it, the Overload champion might teleport out of the radius, and so you just waste the grenade entirely. So again, Skip or Pulse are going to be the most consistent arc grenades to stun Overload champions if that's the route you wish to take. And then, of course, rounding things out, Thunderous Retort and Lightning Strikes Twice. Awesome, awesome for just making those arc abilities do so much more for you, really leaning into that ability spam, which is always a fun route to go. Outside of the artifact mods, just want to touch quickly on resistance, what else to use in your chest piece after thermoshock plating. This one's kind of up to you. I think it'll kind of depend on what's giving you the most amount of trouble here. For me, it always came down to sniper and melee resistance. There's definitely going to be opportunities to take advantage of both of these. Boss room, you're probably going to have to deal with melee resistance more than sniper resistance, but in the tank area, which is a wide, long-distance open area, sniper resistance will absolutely matter here, and that will come in clutch. So if you're having trouble in the tank room, probably go sniper resistance if that's giving you more of an issue than the boss room. But if the boss room is giving you the most amount of trouble, it's probably wise to go with something like melee resistance, just because you've got that up-close bonus coming in to help you out from any enemies that are sneaking up on you. So, but that's up to you. Either one's going to be fine. Just, you know, as in your experience as you're getting through this, trying to get that clear, just figure out what's giving you trouble and adapt. All right, Court, what do you recommend for our hunters?
Well, it's going to be a bit of a stuck record here because it's going to be the exact same as the last couple of episodes. I do want to just quickly make a correction. I mentioned Cryoclasm's the one that gives you the sliding ability, spawns a bunch of stasis crystals for the Titans. It's not. That's Howl of the Storm. Cryoclasm is the one where you smash into crystals. You can do that. So just wanted to highlight that before I get a bunch of angry messages from Saint and fellow Stasis Titans. But yes, Hunters. Shinobu's Vow. Next. Yeah, like, I think this strike in particular, you will benefit the most with Jolt, with Shinobu's Vow, with skip grenades. There's going to be a lot of enemies. There's going to be a lot of jolting. So this will be the best build for hunters. You could go down the stasis route as well, and you can go down Night Stalker. Those are still viable options if you want the stasis kind of control that I've talked about in many previous episodes, and tether as well. Just because of the sheer amount of ads, being able to tether, 20 ads at once will be, really up there. But for my recommended build for the Devil's Lair would be Shinobu's Vow. Up to you if you want to go Gathering Storm or Arc Staff. And obviously you'll be using skip grenades here. For the aspects, Flow State, Tempest Strike, or Lethal Current. Obviously Tempest Strike's getting a buff next season, but that may be a nice alternative to Lethal Current. For the sparks, you're going for Beacons, Amplitude, Discharge, and Shock. Amplitude and Discharge obviously have those 10-second cooldowns, and both of them are you're spawning orbs of power and ionic traces just to really enhance your build here. For your specific mods, Harmonic Siphon, again, it's another avenue to get more orbs of power for yourself and your teammates. Font of Might you can utilize here, High Energy Fire, Elemental Charge, and Elemental Ordnance. Good to have. You can have Bomber and Bolstering Detonation. I've talked about this a lot, and with some people as well that have asked me. I don't necessarily. I'm not a big fan of firepower in this specific build. But I know some folks have went down that route of firepower instead of elemental ordnance, and that's entirely up to you if you want to. And this will really create you're going to be throwing a lot of grenades all the time with firepower. I haven't went down that particular route because I like to enhance both my grenades, but also my general build as well. When you're combining it with arc weapons. And that's the big kind of draw here, is that you will be using a lot of arc weapons to enhance the sort of, the entire circle of this build. So arc special ammo weapons, ideally with chain reaction or reservoir burst, to capitalize on the wide blinding effect that you'll get with Spark of Beacons. So, for example, you can go for Forbearance, Salvager Salvo, Midas Reckoning, Plug 1, but any other arc specials can do just fine here. And I've said this before, but Salvager Salvo can be purchased directly at the tower, the tower's weapons kiosk for some endgame currency if you don't have any of those, or if you're still currently chasing Forbearance and Midas Reckoning. For your heavy, Impetus said there with Thunderlord, that is a very top tier choice here. I would recommend in this particular build, go for Thunderlord. You could go for LFRs as well, but I think Thunderlord's just a really safe bet. And Impetus said there with the summary that the boss really doesn't have a lot of health, to be honest. It's not, the boss is not the threat here, it's the amount of ads. And so you want these ad clearing weapons like Forbearance and Thunderlord. Mentioned this before, but Resilience and Discipline are your key stat spreads, and then Mobility. You can go over 50 mobility, but remember, Amplified does provide you that plus 50 mobility bump. And if you're like me, who likes to min-max, then I'd just keep it at 50. Strength and Intellect are not really important here. You're going to be picking up a lot of orbs, so you could maybe spec a little bit more into Intellect if you want to get your super back. It's really not, it's not mandatory though. But if you don't want to go down that route, you can spend a little bit on recovery, but they are quite high. Intellect and recovery are pretty high stats to spec into. So like I said, this build does, it can be used anywhere, but it does thrive in endgame content because in easier content, things do die pretty fast for Jolt not to really make a lot of effect. But here you will have a lot of bulkier targets in close proximity. So jolting and chaining, the chaining cooldown reduction is a lot of fun. And of course, you'll be using your arc weapons, and you'll just be an unstoppable force. It's a lot of fun, just seeing a lot of arc jolting between 20 opponents. I've posted this build and the sort of gameplay loop that you'll be looking at, and the sort of power fantasy over on the Discord. And the next one I've also posted, I won't go into too much detail, and that's the stasis control build. That is all about Renewal Grasp with Agar Scepter. A little bit more, you would be more Omni champion focused, just with you using Agar Scepter. You could bring in a machine gun as well with your auto or scout for your energy slot. So it's a little bit less, team friendly. But this is your auxiliary, your sort of your support build here. So Dustfield, Touch of Winter, Grim Harvest, Hydrons, Chains, Shards, Conduction, and Rhyme. And for mods, this is the one where I would recommend firepower mods. So Elemental Shards will allow your stasis wells to count as your Elemental Shards to count as stasis wells. Your Elemental Charge will give you that +2 Charger Light stacks. Firepower ×3, you get that 45% grenade return, just to offset the big cooldown that Renewal Grasps has with Dustfield. And it does consume 1 Charger Light stack per grenade thrown. Impact Induction, 1 copy provides 20 grenade energy on melee hits, which does have a 7-second cooldown. And Bomber, 1 copy provides 14% grenade energy. So you can see the combination here. If you manage to get your grenade thrown, and then Impact Induction tag, you're already up to 65% grenade return, and then Bomber, you're up to 79%. So you've almost got your grenade back at this point. And you can swap in you can swap in High Energy Fire or Font of Might with a firepower mod if you so please. Like I said, it's a little bit more of an advanced build here, but I think it really thrives just because of the close proximity. You've got a lot of ads spawning. You can utilize the very large slowing effect, especially next season with the slow effect being buffed up, just to freeze a lot of enemies at once. So I've posted about this and I've talked about this a lot of times last couple of episodes, and this is all up on the Discord as well. I've got a big section with the gameplay loop, stat distribution, the sort of main loop with ordnance mods. If you want to go down that path, or if you want to go down the firepower mods path, you can go down that one as well. And just gives you a little bit of kind of an overview of how this build kind of generally works. So again, it's probably one of my preferred builds for a lot of these GMs. If I just want a nice, safe, 25, 30-minute run, especially if I'm maybe teaching or bringing someone who's brand new into these GMs, this is the sort of go-to that I go for these builds. But when I'm just wanting to have a little bit of fun, I'll do my Shinobu's Vow Arc Hunter build. Well, that's the Hunters. This is where I would pass over to Saint, but Saint's not here this week. So I'm going to recommend one of his builds that he has spoke about. I think it was not last episode, but the episode before that, and that is the sort of you have the power of Zeus. So again, this is an arc subclass build here. He has recommended Thunder Crash with Hoyle, Heart of Inmost Light, Storm Grenade, Thunderclap. For aspects, you've got Touch of Thunder with the enhanced grenades. Maybe change next season. We'll see if he recommends something else in Touch of Thunder's place, if he's not going for Storm Grenade with the slight nerfs there. But he's also recommended Knockout for the melee kills, trigger health regen, and grant Amplified. For Sparks, he's went for Magnitude, Recharge, Shock, Ions, and if you want to swap one out, you can put in Beacons instead. And that's the one that I've suggested with my Arc Hunter. While you're amplified, Arc Special Weapons kills blind enemies. For specific mods, Saints suggested Elemental Ordnance, Elemental Charge, Explosive Wellmaker, Well of Life, Bomber, and Firepower. And just a little kind of comment and information for this build. In all bold, throwing more lightning than Zeus.
I'm sold.
Yeah. Titans, you have it. For the gameplay loop, dash, into throw grenade, into collect wells and traces, into melee, into dash, into grenade again. So it's a nice clean loop there. And you're capitalizing on the elemental charge to fuel our firepower, which, as I've mentioned before, it's very strong. 15% per mod, very, very strong. Again, if you could swap out your Hoyle for Curus of the Falling Star or Aeons, if you need to, Bomber and Firepower will also get your grenade back very quickly. It's not as instantaneous. He's recommended specifically weapons, Wither Horde, Sweet Sorrow, and Seventh Seraph Saw. Alternatively, you could go down the route of Wish Ender for Bairns or Salvagers, and Storm Chaser, which would be sort of my, for Hunters, again, that second couple of weapons there. Just a combo with Beacons. But yeah, that is Hunters and Titans. Impetus, what are the Warlocks cooking up for this Grandmaster?
Yeah, Warlocks have a few options. We keep forgetting to kind of talk about Aeons. It's always just, it seems like it's an afterthought, but I do want to say, in regards to this team in particular, Court, I don't know how you feel about it, but for me, while there are a lot of champions, just due to the fact that they always show up with a large number of ads in tow, I'm very cautious to recommend finishing champions, as that can really put you in a dangerous spot. I feel like with the large number of ads, just sticking on an ammo finder mod is probably the safer bet, because you will have the most amount of chances to generate ammo bricks that way, as opposed to going straight for the Aeons for finishers. I don't know. Yeah, Hunters are definitely in a good spot to go finish stuff, as are Titans on Arc, just because you can survive either through invis or just tanking a ridiculous amount of damage. But do you think Aeons is necessary for like a new team that maybe might be struggling with power ammo in the boss room?
In the boss room, it's tricky, because we'll talk about how, how I think there's only 2 overloads in the boss room anyway, but they tend to stay quite clear from where we're going to suggest where you set up. But right. No, I completely agree with you. With this particular strike, the champs spawn with a lot of ads, and really the champs need to go down first before a lot of the ads, or at least they're the priority. So you don't have a lot of time to go in and finish them. Maybe if, I do have a Void Hunter build with that sort of very specific gameplay loop in mind, where go invis, go and finish a champion with Aeons, that'll turn you back into invis and you can get out of there. But yeah, no, I think just because of the sheer amount of ads, I think there's much more chance of you getting more ammo drops with Ammo Finder, or just naturally anyway, just with the amount of ads that are spawning.
Yep. Yeah, I'd probably steer clear of Aeons. There are, again, this is a perfect opportunity for ability spam, which is what I'm going to recommend for the Warlocks. We do have plenty of different options here. As far as supers, again, Chaos Reach tuning is coming next season, so I advise sticking to Storm Trance, especially in the boss room, but also in the deactivating the security measures room. You will have a lot of enemies in close proximity to one another, so Tickle Fingers or Storm Trance is actually a very solid option for ad clear, even though it's a roaming super, which can be a little bit riskier, just in general.
I did want to just quickly step in and say it is tier 4 it's going to, so it's currently tier 2.
Okay.
That's the second slowest, and tier 4 is the second fastest. So it's going from tier 2 to tier 4. I just had a quick check up while we were...
That's Chaos Reach. Good.
That's Chaos Reach, yep.
Good to know. Yeah, that's definitely a buff. Yep, so Storm Transfer here, this is going to be very, very potent when you need it, when you need it in a pinch. So definitely recommend Storm Trance. For Rifts, Healing is going to be perfect here. Love Healing Rift, very strong in a pinch. For the exotics, this is where we have plenty of options here. So the two that I've been recommending for the most part have been Getaway Artists and Fallen Sunstar, really just kind of building around ability energy, getting grenades back in particular, as both of those can help out. I was looking at Crown of Tempest before I went in and did some runs. I think you could make a case for it. Unfortunately, for most of the GMs, Fallen Sunstar has really just kind of leapt to the forefront in terms of the neutral kit that it provides over Crown of Tempest. Crown of Tempest does revolve around getting kills with arc abilities, which is not too difficult, but you need to keep being lethal, and there are going to be some points in a GM where you need to kind of stop and retreat, especially when a bunch of champions show up. So that can be kind of hard to keep. The uptime can be hard to maintain consistently, but it's a very situational exotic, and I do think you could make a case for Crown of Tempest in the Devil's Lair, particularly with the ability to extend the duration of Storm Trance. In the boss room in particular, you could be in your Storm Trance for a very long time, just due to how we're going to recommend you guys position yourselves in the boss room. So you could, if you wanted to try it, but I think for most of you guys going in here for the first time, I will recommend Getaway Artist and Fallen Sunstar. The mod setup that I'm going to recommend, as well as my ability and fragments, are going to be the same for both of those pieces. We are going to do Storm Grenade. Again, if you are wanting to run Surge Detonators to disrupt Overload champions, you would want to switch to Pulse or Skip Grenades for the Warlocks, but Storm is going to be great for just general add clear damage. The melee is up to you. Ball or Chain, I use either one. They're both fine. They're going to be great next season. I don't really think there's a particular advantage that one provides in this GM setting, so that is your call. For the aspects, Arc Soul and Electrostatic Mind are the two options here. Really, really powerful. Obviously, Arc Soul is going to be necessary for Getaway Artists, but you should run that regardless for Fallen Sunstar. It's just a nice extra thing to have in your back pocket when you cast your Rift. For our fragments, the 4 sparks I recommend: Ions, Shock, Recharge, and Magnitude. They're the exact same that Sinkabir recommends for his Heart of Inmost Light build. They are phenomenal. Again, we're really just making sure that those arc grenades, in particular the Storm Grenade, is as strong as powerful. It's a fantastic tool for being offensive and locking down an area. We have a lot of spawn doors in this GM, so you can see where they are. You do also have to worry about enemies spawning from skiffs dropping down, so in both of those cases, getting a Storm Grenade out there early as the enemies are either dropping from the skiff or coming out of the door is a great way to just entirely negate an ad wave and make sure that you are safe. So we'll start with Getaway Artist here. Let's talk about our mods. I start, as I always do, with the Elemental Well mod, Elemental Ordnance. So getting a defeat with a grenade spawns an Elemental Well. I then like to equip Seeking Wells to make sure that I don't have to go and get the well. The well will come to me. That could be very nice when I am pinned down. Makes that very safe for me. The next thing I do is I equip Elemental Charge so that when I do pick up that Elemental Well, I get 2 stacks of Charge with Light, because that Elemental Well is going to be Arc, because I threw an Arc Grenade to get the defeat. With my 2 stacks of Charge with Light, I then put on Firepower so that I get a portion of my grenade energy when I use my grenade. That's going to be very nice with Getaway Artist, because I have to consume the grenade to get the Arc Soul, so I can still get grenade energy back, even though I'm not actually throwing the grenade out and dealing damage. And then just on top of that, if I want to get even more consistently charged with light, I have Shield Break Charge on so that I can get charged with light when I match the energy of the shield on a combatant. If you're still not happy with all that grenade return, you can throw on a few bomber mods on your class item, solar class item there, so that when you use your class ability to refresh your Arc Soul timer, that's the Rift, you can get even more, you can get a reduction in your grenade cooldown. So that is the mod setup that I have to complement Getaway Artist. You can also run that on Fallen Sunstar. That'll be even more potent because you're not going to be consuming the grenade to make an Arc Soul. You just throw the grenade out, so you can deal damage and then also get energy back for throwing the grenade. So with the Getaway Artist in particular, the gameplay loop here, we are consuming our grenade for that 20-second Arc Soul, a sentient supercharged Arc Soul. We're going to have that go off. It'll be kind of going on in the background. Do remember that when it fires that burst, and that burst hits a target, you will gain 4.5% grenade energy. So that is getting recharged in the background. Once I hit about 5 seconds left on my timer, I like to find a place where I can cast my Rift in safety, as my Rift will refresh the Arc Soul timer. Get that back up for 20 seconds, and then of course I'll have an even longer time for more bursts to get grenade energy back, and then by that point, after about 40 seconds have passed with my Sentient Arc Soul, I should be very close to getting another grenade back if it hasn't already come back, so I can just keep on looping that if I want to have Arc Souls up over and over and over again. Very strong, very safe, very fun. Arc Soul is going to be really potent in here because it is easy to get surrounded if you position yourself in a poor spot, and so having the turret point out enemies to shoot at is going to be very useful. So pay attention to the direction that your Arc Soul is firing at. If it is behind you, you might want to turn around quickly. It could have an exploding shank sneaking up on you. So speaking of exploding shanks, Court, let's get into the actual GM and talk about our pain points.
Yeah, I've looked at our script here, and I don't think we've got a lot to really talk about here. It's one of those strikes which is, on paper, it looks a lot. There's a lot going on. It's one of those strikes that's very ad dense. In terms of like difficulty, it's not up there with like Lightblade or anything like that. You don't have this bulky boss that runs around or anything like that. It's a strike based off one of the original strikes from Destiny 1, so it's not too taxing, but we will give some sort of feedback and pain point tips here. Right at the start is probably where a lot of folks may suggest you to go and take your Sparrow and zoom ahead. You can do that if you've been through the strike a number of times. Then yeah, sure, go for it. But if this is your first couple of runs, it's not advised because you will get shot off your Sparrow if you're not careful. There are a lot of Fallen and Hive that spawn. They do fight each other, so you can take that opportunity and as a group take one path and just sort of methodically clear as you move up. So the path of least resistance in my experience here is the left side. Go far, far left and stick to the wall, and just, you can bypass many of the ads. The Hive and the Fallen do fight each other, and because a lot of them are shielded enemies, they'll be fighting for forever because match game also applies to them, which is strange to see, but yeah, there you go. There is an overload champion right at the end, just as you start to progress through the sort of main building area, so remember to deal with it before proceeding, just to ensure you get that platinum. You can take care of him quite easily, just stun him, bypass him, then 180, and then just kind of snipe him there, and then off you go. You don't need to concern yourself with any other ads. They don't really come into play here. Go through some of the structure. You will have a one barrier and a overload champion just before you get to the next area, which is the deactivate security measure room. So again, you'll have a lot of Fallen and Hive here. Once again, they'll be fighting each other as you enter the room, but then you'll have 3 waves of ads once you set up. You can where you want to set up is really entirely up to you, but there are 2 different spots for this room. You've got the small open airspace where you enter from, or you've got the large tunnel with the trains. I think most of the runs I've been through, I've went to the large tunnel with the trains, because you've got that decline you can hide behind. It can get very spicy there, because specifically at that point, there are a lot of hive that spawn, not on you, but directly in front of you. So the open airspace does let you retreat as far back as necessary if you get overwhelmed. So that may be the most sort of user-friendly for newbies coming into this Grandmaster. But as I said, while the other, the train section does offer a decent cover, but little room to move. Once you've set up, once you've got Ghost to start the thing, start the process, you've got the first wave, which will have a bunch of shanks, and an overload captain will spawn in. Once you've dealt with them, there'll be more ads that spawn in. Eventually, we reach to wave 2. You'll have 2 solar shielded wizards, an arc shielded knights, and a barrier champion. Vandal snipers will also appear on the balcony overlooking the scannable as well as the central platform. So just take care of them. They can be a little bit of a nightmare to deal with. As Impetus said at the overview, this may be your best use of sniper resist. And then eventually you'll get to wave 3 and you'll have 2 overload captains and a bunch of ads plus more snipers. This is where, especially for new players coming into this, you want to take it nice and slow. You don't want to be aggressive. Use your grenades, especially with the builds that we've recommended this one. You will be using abilities heavy. Lots of abilities, you should be using them. So use your grenades from a distance and coordinate damage to burst down champions. The fallen arc bolts do track you, and we do have arc burn on. So it can lead to death even behind cover if you expose yourself for a little bit too long. They can come around the corner and get you. And really it's, calling out. It's using your comms for any problematic enemies to your fire team to keep them, to keep everyone focused. And yeah, this is probably maybe the toughest for new players. We'll talk about a little bit what's the sort of overarching pain points for this strike a little bit later on. But this room can be a little bit taxing if you're not prepared. So take it nice and slow, and yeah. Eventually you'll get to finally get out of this room that you've been stuck in for about 20 minutes or so, and you'll get to an external area. Impetus, what can you tell us about that?
Yes, so this will be our outside area here. This is a large, wide open space, huge arena, and there are going to be lots and lots of different groups of enemies. So when you first step outside, you will have a small building kind of right in front of you, just a little bit to your left. And you will have a barrier servitor and then a bunch of minor enemies spawn in, including a few sniper vandals that will show up on the roof of this building. You want to make sure that you target the barrier servitor first. I think the most efficient strategy here is if you have a burst damage super like a Gathering Storm or a Thunder Crash, immediately fire that off at the servitor and then have another member of your fire team kind of aiming down sights with an LFR just to finish it off if the super doesn't kill it. That kind of depends on your power level of the super, but you can one-shot it with the super. If not, just make sure you've got another fire team member ready to finish it off with either a special or a heavy shot. So after that, you're going to start clearing out some of the ads right there. Again, be mindful of the snipers on the top of the building. You will have Vandal snipers that'll be further out in the middle of the wide open area, also looking at you, so be careful. It is very easy to die to that. You're going to move forward to that small building, and then you want to look immediately to your left. You will have another building that's going to be down a platform or two a bit further off. You'll have a few enemies on the roof there that will also be sniper vandals, but then another group of minor fallen enemies down there. You can clear them out. You don't want them shooting at you while you're working on the vehicles that are going to, or the constructs, however we want to call them, that are going to be spread out through this area. So this is where we have 3 different types of vehicles to work on. So you're going to have skiffs that will be coming in periodically. You do have 2 brigs. One is going to be on the left side of the arena and one is going to be on the right side. You'll hear them grumbling around as you're engaging with the enemies. And then of course we have the fallen spider tank in the far back where the exit is. So when we're thinking about what to prioritize here, you can definitely start with the tank if you want, or you can work on the Briggs first. The tank is going to be firing at you. It will have a laser that will point in the direction of where it is going to shoot the tank shot. That laser is going to glow brightly as it kind of charges up to indicate that it's firing, and then of course the bullet will come towards you. That bullet does hurt. You will not survive it. There's nothing you can do to survive it. It will wipe you out, so you want to be aware of where that laser is pointed. If you have fire team members that are kind of don't have an angle or aren't maybe looking, definitely call out where the tank is looking to your fire team. That is going to be very helpful. You do not want to have, you don't want to leave one of your fire team members high and dry with the tank. So again, pick what you're going to focus on. It's best if you're going with the tank to stand on the roof of that first building and try and get an angle there. Getting up high is going to make it easy for you to get to the crit spot of the tank after you blow up the legs and it collapses there. It'll expose its crit spot. So being on the roof is, generally speaking, a better angle on the crit spot than being kind of on the ground or being in the middle of the arena, because you're going to be a little bit lower than the tank at that point. So if that's what you want to start with, go for it. Burst down the tank. Again, this is why we recommend LFRs, because with a rocket launcher, the chances of you hitting that crit spot as opposed to just doing a bunch of AoE damage to either the legs or another part of the tank is just, you don't want to have to deal with that. So line up your shot with the LFR, blast the crit spot when it's exposed. A big thing to be aware of here, I don't think a lot of players are aware, the tank has health gates, and when you hit these certain thresholds, you will spawn in a skiff that will drop off reinforcements in the middle area. These reinforcements can include champions, so again, it's a set amount of health gates and it's a set amount of reinforcements, but that skiff will fly over you as you're dealing with the tank. And again, those turrets deal arc damage and they hurt. So you want to be aware of that. That can lead to a team wipe if you're not careful. So being on the roof, which is where you have the best angle, leaves you to be exposed by the skiff. So just call out when you hear the skiff come in. You know, if you have to stop shooting the tank, do it. It's fine. The enemies that drop off from the skiff are going to hang out in that middle area. They might shoot at you if they have an angle, but they should not be a threat. It should really just be the tank that's firing at you. Maybe the brig has a shot on you, but for the most part, it's just the tank that's going to be the big damage dealer, and then of course the skiffs as they come in, but that's only when you hit certain thresholds in the health. So just be aware of that. Don't get caught off guard by the skiff as it comes in. They will only come in when you're dealing damage, a certain amount of damage to the tank. After we've dealt with the tanks, you then can go on to the brigs. Again, it's best if all three of you just pick one brig and go burst it down and then move on to the next brig. What you definitely don't want to do is the tank and the brigs at the same time, because that would require your team to split up. That is not a recommended move at all. Stick together, prioritize an enemy, talk amongst yourselves, pick one, and then just go down the list of enemies to hit. After you've dealt with the tank and the brigs, you can then move on to the champions that'll be around, as well as the ads. Again, this is kind of, you're going to have a lot of different enemies all spread out. Just be aware of where everything is. You will have kind of directly below you under a pipe, you'll have an overload champion directly beneath that building that you're going to be set up on to deal with the tank. You'll have a barrier server that's going to be a little bit further on in the middle, closer to the end, and then you'll have more champions towards the back by the tank. If you have champions that spawn in from the skiff, they will typically retreat back up to where the tank is. They're mostly going to be overload champions. You will have plenty of overload back there. Again, just damage them from a distance. If you need to get up close to use a super to burst them down, do that, but you want to move up together and very slowly. This is kind of where everything kind of really slows down to a crawl here if it wasn't already slow in the security room. This is not a place to go fast. So move as a group, call out enemies. You will have invisible marauders kind of roaming around. You're going to have the sniper vandals on the sides shooting at you. You'll have enemies in the back, including champions, and of course the brigs, the skiffs, and the tank. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. So there is no need to rush. You're going to have plenty of time to take care of this. You want to make sure that you kill everything before you advance so you do not get surprised and then pinned down. After you do destroy the tank, the exit will open up and you will have a wave of enemies with another overload captain. They will enter from that exit point. You're going to clear all of those enemies out as well as whatever is left on that main platform from the skiff reinforcements, and then finally you can leave and move on to the boss room. So please go slowly. You'll have tons of cover. It's a really hilly terrain, plus the buildings, plus there's some random trees and some side areas and trenches as well. It sounds intimidating, but there's lots of different angles. If you can take up good cover, call out to your fire team so that they can come and take up cover with you. That is a really great way for getting through champions quickly, as well as the brigs. After we get through this outside area, we will move on to the boss room and the boss, Sepix Prime. So, in the boss room, you will have Sepix floating up in the middle. He can teleport farther back out over kind of a watery area. He will teleport frequently. He does not have a lot of health. He does have health gates. We'll get into that in just a moment. For the actual space itself, we're going to have a raised platform that forms kind of a U shape. When you enter the room, you will be at the bottom of the U, and then you'll have kind of a left platform branching out and a right platform branching out. Sepix likes to hang out in that space between the two branching platforms. You will have a small room that is immediately to the left side as you enter this U. And so you can have some enemies that will maybe approach you, but they won't really come into the room. They'll just come right up to the doorway. There are some windows with the glass blown out, so you can aim and shoot through those windows. This is a great place for first-time fire teams to take up residence. It's a safe area. You do have a staircase in this room that does lead down into an under area. You don't have to worry about ads coming up through the staircase. You are welcome to go down into that under area. It does eventually lead out back into the main room, but I would not go too far out, as you don't want to invite enemies to come down into that area, as that can lead to a really awkward death spawn if you're not careful. So just stay up in that top area there. You'll have an angle on most of the main space. You will have an angle on Sepix Prime, and you'll have an angle on all of the champions as they show up. So now we're going to get into the actual damage, the boss phases as it is. I want to quickly touch on our ad wave spawn areas. You're going to have far left and far right doors. This is going to be at the back area of the boss room. You're not going to be going down there. You should not be going down there, but those are where a lot of enemies will spawn. So that is an area that you could throw a grenade down if you want to quickly clear out trash ads. You will have skiffs that come in periodically. Those will drop off enemies, again, in the backside of the boss room, but they'll jump down into the middle area. And then you will also have servitors, 4 of them, that will spawn in once Sepix Prime goes immune during a transition to through a boss phase. So those are kind of the 3 different areas that you need to be aware of. The spawns for all ads are triggered based off of the boss health. Sepix himself does not have a lot of health. He's not too much of a threat. He really just kind of chills in the middle and far positions. What you really need to be aware of are the large amount of ads that spawn throughout the fight, and you do not want to be overwhelmed, as that can make your death, your ghost res, very, very difficult for your team. Sepix Prime will go immune at 66% health bar. That's about a 1/3 chunk, and then of course at 35%, that's the second third health chunk. You're going to be going up against a combination of arc-shielded captains, dregs, vandals, shanks, and a few overload champions, which you will fight 2 of them right off the rip. So in our first phase here, as you enter in, you're going to have 2 champions in front of you, as well as a few ads along the lip there of that U platform shape. Burst them down, and then Sepix will be available. He's going to come out of his immunity shield. You can burst them down immediately if you want to. Again, if you have a damage super, a gathering storm, a thunder crash, that's definitely an option. You can also just use primary weapons to save up for your special and heavy ammo if you want. You will immediately get a lot of ads if you do a burst, as opposed to setting up for the ad spawns if you want to, do damage over time with weaker weapons or weaker abilities. So it's perfectly fine. It's up to you. Just communicate with your fire team. Decide if you're going to do chip damage or burst damage. He will go immune at 66% health bar. Again, that's that 3rd health. You will get 4 void shielded servitors that will spawn up in the air around Sepix Prime. You will need to destroy all 4 of them to start the next damage phase. After your first, we're going to move from the first phase into the second phase by destroying those 4 void shield servitors. You're going to spawn 2 more overload champions. You want to deal with those as quickly as possible, as well as a bunch of ads. So again, the overload champions are a priority. We want to immediately call them out to our fire team, tell them where they are. They do love to teleport, so they can, be in one spot and then they'll get a lot closer all of a sudden. I typically do like to wait for the overload champions to show up a little bit more closer so that I can stun them more consistently. If you're in that small room, look through the windows. When you get an overload champion in your sights, call it out. It could be the case that both of them show up. You just want to designate either the left one or the right one or the close one or the far one to be the first one that you damage, and then you start stunning and bursting them down. Really try and use weapons and grenades here for the champions. If you're having a lot of trouble, if you're dying to the champions a lot, you can use the super on them. It's up to you. I typically like to use the supers just to get through the boss health, just really so that I can get to the ad spawns quicker to set up for those. So it's up to you. If you're more comfortable using your supers on the ads and champions, please do so. It's up to you guys. At 35% health, that is just before the two-thirds health chunk here, you're going to have 4 more void shielded servitors spawn up in the air with Sepix while he's immune. You'll need to kill all 4 of them to get into the next damage phase here. So that'll be the 3rd damage phase. This is after a 2nd immunity phase. You're in the home run stretch. You need to be wary of ad spawns and positioning. Sepix is going to teleport a lot during this phase, but don't worry about it. That big eye is what you're aiming for to get the precision hitbox for that quick burst down. You do not need to worry about champions at this point, so don't get too distracted here. There's still going to be ads. Be aware of that. Call out the ads, deal with them, but at this point you should have at least 1 member in your fire team that's just doing damage to Sepix, so that you can get to the end of the GM. And again, Sepix does not have a lot of health, so it won't take a lot here. A few LFR shots, maybe even a super, and that bar, that final third, will be gone immediately. And that is the end of the Devil's Lair Grandmaster Nightfall. Court, what times can a first-time team expect to clear this GM in?
I think we're suggesting maybe even 45 minutes, just because, every sort of, quote, pain point area can really slow things to a crawl. The deactivate the security measures room and the external area can be just like really slow. But I mean, that's intended. You should be taking it very, very slow. Sepix boss room, maybe not as slow because you do have a lot of things going on. You're going to be relatively static, but yeah, it's not going to be a fast run for your very first run, but once you start getting those repeat clears in, we're maybe looking at about 20 minutes. You really refine your strategy. If you want to start the strike and zoom away in your spiral once you've got a nice handle of that, you're welcome to do that. Get some invis hunters in there just to speed things up, make everyone invis and sort of dart through various areas. But in terms of like the most taxing arena, probably would be both the external area and the security room, just because it can get very overwhelming and pretty painful if you're not taking it nice and slow. If you're not used to how the spawns are or how the ads are spawning, you will just get overrun, and there's nothing you can do about it. So those can be the sort of for your first time clear. Taxing areas would be particularly those 2 areas, and probably the same for your repeat clears. But I would say that this strike can be a lot of fun, and I do enjoy going in here, and I highly recommend it for testing out any endgame loadouts, just due to the varied amount of ads you've got, a lot of range, whether it's really close quarters or quite far away, and you've got. I always talk about these dense ad spawn strikes and activities, and I really love those because it really synergizes with the type of builds and class builds that we talk about and weapons that we recommend as well. I know we've had a lot of discussion and interesting hints and potential things that may occur with some specific weapons in the next couple of seasons from our Q&A and interview last episode, but I really enjoy these type of strikes. It's not hard. It's definitely not light blade or glassway material, but it's not necessarily really easy. You're not just gliding through it. You're not swanning through this strike like you would do with Lake of Shadows. Like, that's relatively easy one. You can just go through in about 10 minutes. Just because there's not a lot of ads. So, yeah, it's a really fun one for this particular strike.
Yeah, definitely go slow. I know we've been saying it's easy, but as always, please do not rush. Nothing worse than taking 10 steps too far, dying, and now your fire team has to cope with having only 2 people, and your res is in a very unsafe spot. So play it safe. You know, the results will show. You'll get that fast time as you keep going in. But yeah, really have fun with your builds here. It's a great for, if you like explosions, this is a perfect GM to just make a lot of explosions, whether it's with weapons or abilities or supers. You know, you're gonna get to see a lot of particle effects just due to the number of enemies that are in here. All right, sir. Well, unless you have anything else you want to add, I think that's the end of the episode.
I'm all good.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to episode 39 of Podcast versus Enemies. We also want to thank our audio engineer, MisterSudden, for his fantastic work behind the scenes. We don't have a lot planned for the rest of this season's episodes. We're winding down, we're playing other stuff, and we're looking forward to season 19. So feel free to hit us up with ideas and or topics if you want us to touch on anything before we get to season 19. Of course, with season 19, I do just want to remind you guys, we are planning on doing a passover of the 3.0 updated light subclasses. We're also going to be looking at the exotic weapons. We're getting a huge tuning pass that's coming with season 19 for the exotic weapons, so we'll be taking a look at those, as well as the exotic armor for the 3 different classes. So we have a lot coming up for next season that we're saving for next season, because we know there's going to be a few things happening there in the updates. So as always, we will of course be talking about any new information that comes out about next season's sandbox, as it is discussed in the TWABs. But until then, my name is Impetus. You can find me by that name on Discord and in Destiny, and as Impetus always on Twitter and Twitch. Saint Kabir can be found on Twitter and Twitch as Saint_Kabir, and on Discord as Saint Kabir. Court, where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter as @CourtProjects, and Court on Discord. Taking a little bit of a break this next week or so you might not see a lot of me, but hit me up. Any messages I'll still get, and I'll try and respond ASAP. But you can also find my documentation and various other Destiny spreadsheets from the Massive Breakdowns community over on the Destiny Massive Breakdowns website. All right, thank you very much for listening. We'll see you on the next one.